Okay, well, it's 9 o'clock local time here in Perth, WA, and so I'm going to start. Hello, I'm Algis Kalukas, and it's my pleasure to welcome one and all to the 15th in our free monthly virtual What Talk series. WHAT stands for Waterside Hypotheses, Aquatic Theories, and if nothing else, I hope the label conveys an idea of plurality, that there are several ideas explaining why we are so different from the other great apes, but all broadly based on a waterside theme. This diversity of ideas has been reflected in our program so far, with speakers bringing a wide variety of expertise from many different fields. You only have to peruse the list of videos recorded for posterity on our website, whattalks.com, to see that. And it's a real pleasure and a privilege that our guest speaker today, Bert Chan, continues this trend. I've put a potted bio of him on the website, which some of you may have already read in the email I sent out. But in a nutshell, Bert is actually a researcher in artificial life and evolutionary algorithms, and currently works as a research software engineer at Google Brain Tokyo. So Bert's work focus is very much looking to the future, a theme I hope he will touch upon in his talk. Bert got interested in physical anthropology through reading Wikipedia and did a postgrad degree in Sweden on human cognition, specialising in the phenomenon of synesthesia, which is where people get their senses mixed up and perceive one sense as another. I first came across Bert in 2011 when he wrote a chapter on the subject of human aquatic colour vision in our book. Here it is. This is his chapter. And if Bert allows me, I might put that PDF on the website. Bert is also very artistic and has designed a few beautiful graphical posters which summarise the arguments of the Waterside model. He won a prize for one of these at the Human Evolution Past, Present and Future Conference in London in 2013, which was organised by the late Peter Rhys-Evans. I think this is the only time I've ever actually met Bert in person. Anyway, enough of me. Let's now flip screens to Tokyo. And Bert, it's a great pleasure to have you as our guest speaker. I'm really looking forward to hearing your perspective on all of this.
Okay, thank you, Algis, for introducing me. My name is Bert Chan. I'm going to talk about the summary of the Waterside model of human evolution and the possible future of this model and how to verify that. I'm now a researcher in Google Brain Tokyo in Japan. I'm also interested in the topic of evolution or human evolution. And in the community, I was known as Chuck before. This is a photo of me and David Attenborough in the Human Evolution Conference. So my work is on mostly on artificial life. Here are some of the videos of my work on a system called Landia. So here are some virtual creatures and some evolutionary simulations. Although the work is almost always in the more lower level biology, virtual biology, but it's also related to the evolution of life forms. So I feel connected to the study of human evolution. Here's an agenda of today's talk. I have a little deep on the topic based on color perception of human. And I'll give a deeper dive and also a run on the topic. That is a few posters about the human blueprints. I will argue that the different models in human evolution can have some confluence. So I suggest a title called the multi-specialist of human. And then I'll introduce some modern technologies that I believe can be some kind of open sea to human evolution research. So when I was studying in the master degree in Sweden, I was interested in a neurological condition called synesthesia that is very related to human color vision or perception. So, for example, some people may, when they see view symbols or hearing sounds, they will also see some colors in their brain. So there's a very interesting phenomena. After my study in Sweden, I remember at that time in 2009, I read about aquatic ape hypothesis in Wikipedia. And I thought, oh, this model is very sensible and logical. So, and then but I learned that it's also very controversial. But I asked the question, why is it controversial? And then I dug into the rabbit hole of human evolution. At that time, I asked the question, there are many very diverse arguments in human evolution, like they were possibly adapted for running, for diving, or cooking, or throwing spears. Also, maybe also important in human evolution, or also sexual selection. And there are many aspects in human evolution, like the hominid lineage, the fossil human ancestors, and the different stone ages, and also the recent out of Africa coastal migration or inland migration. They're pretty much settled. There are many small advances in these topics, but the baseline is very solid. But why not the physical body evolution? How are each aspect of our body evolved, especially the soft body parts? So the question is, in particular, why the Waterside or the so-called aquatic ape theory so controversial? Are there any of the arguments proven or disproven? And is it possible to turn these aquatic ape ideas into a normal science? If it's possible, what is lacking in the methodology? So I have my first little research into the topic. For now, when I look back into this research, it feels very preliminary. It should have more solid work to be done in this direction. This chapter, it was published in the ebook Was Man More Aquatic in the Past, edited by Mario, Elgis, and Mark, in 2011. So the basic idea is maybe humans' color vision, if the aquatic ape hypothesis is reasonable, then it may have some influence on color vision as well. So one argument is maybe the color vision is converging to those of semi-aquatic mammals. One observation is the color vision, SML cones, the pigments, the S-cone pigment may have a lower wavelength specific wavelength that is similar to some semi-aquatic mammals. And in the case of color blindness, the M or L cones are missing, or they have shifted wavelengths. So maybe they are converging to other semi-aquatic mammals. So maybe I argued that maybe color blindness is not a defect, but an adaptation to an underwater world. Another argument is there exist many fuzzy color terms in many world languages. Like in Japanese, aoi means both green and blue in ancient times. Now they have separate terms for blue and green, midori and aoi, but in the old times, it's just one term. So there are also other similar terms in Old English, Irish, or other languages. And many of them are in the near the equator. So, and also in Old Chinese, I argue that some color terms like Qing or Chong or Yun, these characters, they also mean some mixed color terms like blue, green, or black, or gray. And they have similar words or cognates that means clear water, cool water, or deep water. So I argue that maybe in the ancient times when a language, human language, was first evolved, they have one color term for water or the characteristics of water. And then, and it's basically describing blue and green. And later, because of modern times, we need more color terms. So they separate into different terms of blue or green or black. So after this initial study, I have a deep dive into the various arguments in aquatic ape. And now we call that Waterside model. I grouped them into an infographic and presenting the many arguments in a graphical way. And also try to cite the actual papers or books that actually suggested these arguments, so we can better trace these ideas. If we zoom in this poster, the swimming and floating arguments are like that humans are the best swimmers or divers among the apes. Of course, there are we are prone to drowning, not like the other animals, but we are actually better than other apes. We have diverse swimming and diving gaits that we have a breaststroke, front crawl, or dolphin kick. We are somehow quite efficient in the swimming relative to other apes. There are many arguments, like maybe our underskin fat may be evolved to keep warm and increase buoyancy, and also it can help to streamline our body into a shape that is more easier to swim inside water. And maybe the loss of body hair is for reducing drag. And before the total loss of body hair, it seems like the hair growth patterns follow the water flowing pattern when we're swimming or diving. And also our feet and our hands, maybe we can argue that they are like paddle or scoop, is easier for us to traverse in the water. Also, our physiology may help in the human apnea diving ability. Some coastal tribes nowadays, like the sea gypsy or the pearl divers, they are still doing underwater foraging, and they keep their mode of dives are like soft dives into around 20 meters underwater, and they will go up to the water surface to breathe and then dive again. And some of them even can dive up down to maximum 100 meters, as some competitive divers show that it's possible for human physiology. And actually, it's shown that any age from babies to old people can learn diving. So maybe we have enhanced the diving reflex, and maybe our voluntary breath control is evolved better to be diving in the water. In terms of pregnancy and infancy, we know that babies and pregnant women, they love to be in water. Babies can learn to swim and dive instinctively before they can crawl or walk. And there are studies showing that water birth is possible and may be beneficial to the pregnant woman. And the human genitals also show that maybe there are adaptation to a world with water. And the hidden estrus may be because the human body is underwater, and the estrus, that is swelling of the genitals, may be no use underwater. And also face-to-face sex may be because of frustration body when our body evolved for diving and swimming. For the upper body, the shoulders and the head part, it seems like there are special adaptations for waterproofing and thermal regulation. Like the sebum glands are mostly concentrated in the upper body and the head. And also we have earwax, and the nostrils are actually more protruded, and somehow we can close the nostrils, as some divers shown that is possible. Also the sweat glands for thermal regulation is also concentrated in the upper part of our body. In contrast, our lower body is insulated by underskin fat, so it's insulated for heat and for water. And some argue that the oral cavity of human body is specialized for suction feeding or hard shell cracking. That may be a pre-adaptation to speech. On the other hand, our aquatic diet may be an enabling factor for the evolution of intelligence and language. Like the marine diet full of DHA and iodine, etc., may provide the nutrients for a bigger brain. And the breath control and the oral cavity may be pre-adaptation to speech. And why we especially evolved vocal and facial expression as a choice of channel instead of body language, maybe because it's more efficient above the water surface. And also many aspects of our senses, like weaker smell, underwater vision, color vision, and our love of salt and umami taste, and a better balancing sense may also be beneficial to a water world. So these are the arguments of the aquatic ape or waterside models. I also made another poster to summarize the different space and time aspects of the waterside models. And it didn't shown before, and I showed these different scenarios, locations, and timelines of these models. So for different models by these different researchers or those propose those variants of waterside models, they propose different most aquatic phases or different U-turns, why human go through a proposed water phase and semi-aquatic phase and back to land. But emerging timeline shown that the evidence show that there may be in the early hominins, like the Australopithecus and their similar species, they may have utilized freshwater food sources and also developed the technology that like stone tools to eat those hard-shelled invertebrates or fishes. And then later, Homo sapiens developed the technologies for more coastal diets. And then later, they engaged in coastal migration and then spread all over the world. And then later, in the Neolithic time, they are so-called going back to the land through rivers and then developed agriculture. So for the locations of these different models, it all started with the East and South Africa. Some researchers suggest that there are coastal forests, riverine corridors that the early hominins evolved there, and they keep migrating in and out inside these corridors. Later, the coastal migration from East Africa or up to the tip of South America, maybe they, especially in the North America, researchers call that a kelp forest highway. And in fact, this coastal migration model is quite well received in archaeology. And also we have modern coastal tribes. They still do underwater foraging, like sea gypsy or pearl divers in Southeast Asia and in Japan, Korea. They are we can call them living fossils that maybe a semi-aquatic lifestyle is not some science fiction, but actually possible for the human physiology and anatomy. So there are different scenarios that maybe early apes or hominins are already wading, and that led to bipedalism. And and there's an idea that already gathering some very good evidence is that shore-based diet enabled bigger brain evolution of bigger brains. Start from the freshwater food used by early hominins, and then early Homo used pebble tools to eat fresh water food, and Homo sapiens use use stone like fishing for in the coastal areas. And there are many isotopes or aquatic animal remains or shell middens that served as the evidence of this model. So here, there was the two infographics posters that I summarized for the Waterside ideas. And I also made a poster for another very influential model, that is the endurance running model. I actually really like this model too, because it's also well summarized the many features of the human body. The endurance running model is now the most popular one in the paleoanthropology, and many people actually treat it as some kind of fact. But I think it's still a model that needs more evidence. It's focusing on thermoregulation because human is in fact the best marathon runner among the animals. And there are also many modern tribes that do persistent hunting. And many features like sweating, hair loss, and circulation may also help to cool down the body. That is good or marathon running. And also many features can block sunlight when we were running. We are running in the open field. Many features help to stabilize the head, upper body, and the lower body, so that when we are running, our arms or our head help to stabilize the body. And the energetics of our body also like longer arms, our foot arches, and our tendons, ligaments, and also well suited for running. And of course, we can run for a marathon, 40 km. It's itself a very interesting thing that we can do as an animal. I always think that these models, like the Waterside model and the running model, they seem to be at odds with each other, and the community that's suggesting them seems to be at odds with each other. But I want to argue that they are not mutually exclusive. In the 2021, there was a Carter symposium called Human Physical Activity. You can say it's more like mainstream, one of the mainstream symposium, and they have more focus on the endurance running hypothesis. But I'm enlightened because they included diving in their poster, and actually they have some discussion of the human adaptation to apnea situations like hard altitudes and aquatic environments. So I think it's a good start to actually discussing Waterside and running ideas on the same par, at the same level, because they are all very important. And I encouraging people to go to anthropogeny.org because there are many interesting symposium and also the MOCA database of human features. Back in the 1991 book, The Aquatic Ape, Fact or Fiction, the blue book, when I opened that physical book in my hand, there's a little chapter about arguing that Waterside or the aquatic ape hypothesis is not necessarily mutually exclusive with the savannah or running hypothesis. And although it's a very short paragraph, I think it's a very sensible idea to, it's worth talking more about it. Actually, we can see that many arguments from both models are actually compatible. Like we humans have a better in endurance in many activities like walking, running, swimming, diving, with different gaits and possible speeds. Many of our features like stronger legs, flexible arms, and also our multi-purpose feet and our hands are actually good for all of these activities. Our descendant larynx enabling mouth breathing is important for both diving and running. And our upper body thermoregulation and the dark skin of our African ancestors are also very important adaptation to the open field and open water rather than in the forest. And things like we have a better 3D balancing ability. All of these are actually compatible to both a semi-aquatic and a terrestrial life. So maybe many of them are pre-adaptations, and also maybe they are multi-purpose adaptations with some trade-off between different scenarios. But I think for now we should let's not talk about which comes first or which is more important. We should talk about they can be adaptations to both scenarios. And one common ground is humans is a good at endurance activities like hiking, marathon, some English channel swimming, and apnea diving up down to 100 meters, and also we are longer mating, something like that. So I like to think human is actually the triathlon ape. Triathlon is a activity in Olympics, in the Olympics that we can say is a show of our best adaptations. Marathon is adaptations in running and endurance. And cycling is running, that means our adaptation in our long legs, in endurance, and also our technology in developing the bicycle. And also, of course, the swimming is showing us our semi-aquatic and endurance adaptation. In many of the discussions of human adaptations, we often call humans generalists. But I would argue that human is not very generalist because we are good in something, but we are actually very bad in many things, like we are bad at short distance running, we cannot fly, and we have weak muscles. And we have bad working memory, even compared to our chimpanzee close relatives. And in contrast, we are very good, specialized in many multiple aspects. Like as mentioned, we have good at running, diving, endurance, and also we also engage in activities like cooking, tool use, and vocal communication. And it seems like we are good, very good in these few aspects, and they make us what is human. So rather than a generalist, I would say that human is a multi-specialist. So that summarizes my thoughts in how can we think of the models as not at odds with each other, but we can expand the models into a bigger picture. And now I'm going to describe a few tools, modern technology that we can use to explore the open sea of human evolution. There are some discussions about the stagnation of science. Like in Twitter, I recently see some trending posts that say that disruptive science has declined and no one knows why. And some people say that maybe it's because the bureaucracy or the flawed funding model of science is discouraging some novelty research in science, and is more focusing on incremental studies rather than going into some new ways that is more risky. And some also argue that maybe there's some stagnation in paleoanthropology, and maybe because the professionals usually rely on some hard evidence, like fossil evidence, stones, tools, and some genetic evidence. And it's not always easy to gather this information. So, and also in the last talk, in one talk with John Landon, I asked a question. Why people in paleoanthropology are not, they don't like to talk about some big pictures like the big model or the theory of everything about human physical evolution. And he said that maybe, I paraphrase his words, maybe if some professors, they have more experience in the field, then they can talk about this in some books. So I have a feeling that it's not too frequent to talk about these big models in paleoanthropology. Please correct me if you find other papers talk about it. And also we can see some kind of stagnation in the Waterside model itself. Since Asta Hardy and Elaine Morgan talk about this like 50 years ago, we still want to see more evidence to support or actually disprove many of his arguments. So one paper by John Landon, I like it a lot because he talked about umbrella hypotheses or umbrella models that he used aquatic ape as one example, but actually the mainstream endurance running model is also a kind of umbrella model. That means they group a large number of arguments inside a one model. Is quite attractive to many people because it tries to explain many aspects of human in a simple term. But it's the paper correctly say about many of the problems, like these models have too many arguments, and it's very hard to verify or falsify this model. It has to be do one by one, but they are usually related to each other, closely related to each other, so it's very hard to verify. And sometimes we will have some internal inconsistency in these models. But I think these umbrella models are actually good if we can do it right. If we can do it right, then they can become some kind of theory of everything in the study of human evolution. We got attempts for a theory of everything in physics, in mathematics, or in biology. That is the new synthesis of evolution. So why not in human evolution? Why can't we have this kind of theory of everything? We should be able to get this kind of theory too. So in particular, for Waterside models, what are the weaknesses or strengths so that we can discuss how to improve these models. The weaknesses, some of them are external ones, like the public image. We perceived the Waterside model or aquatic ape hypothesis as some fringe theory, or there are much misunderstanding, like, oh, you're saying that we evolved from mermaid or Aquaman. Some people ridiculed with these very strange misunderstandings that actually people didn't talk about it. And also there's some disconnection between the small Waterside community and the mainstream community, that we should think about ways to reconnect these communities and not some silos that they talk about their own theories or their own models. And internally, there are some problems with the Waterside models. Like many of the ideas I described in the posters, they remain some speculations or qualitative guesses, rather than some quantitative things that we can actually do experiments to verify. There are lack of data and also a lack of methodology. And that's why some researchers call the whole thing pseudoscience. And I think it's a very pity. It's a pity to get this label. So I think we should do more things to prove that it's not pseudoscience. And also because the nature of these Waterside models is they're focusing on some soft tissue like the body fat or the hair. They are not in the fossil records, so it's hard to produce hard evidence for these most of the speculations. On the other hand, we can see some strengths of Waterside model, and there are already a few aspects they are relatively successful. That means they have more data, they have better methodology, and they have managed to produce hard evidence, and that is well received in a wider community, scientific community. Some of them are like coastal migration. That is actually the mainstream in archaeology. And I have seen some papers that argue that they have to produce evidence, or they have to argue against coastal migration because it's already the mainstream, so they have to argue against it. There's also a shore-based diet model. There are many evidence. I mentioned that shown that there's a freshwater and later coastal diet consumed by our ancestors. Also, there are many research in diving physiology, in the sports science. They actually do some studies with competitive divers, and also I know some researchers, they flew to Southeast Asia to actually work with those sea gypsies to actually have the experience and get the data with those coastal tribes. And also we have some very sensible discussions about wading bipedalism. There's some summary research that actually lists wading as a reasonable reason for bipedalism. But we cannot say that these successful stories are evidence for other arguments. We cannot say that. But we can treat them as a scientific background for so that we can examine other arguments in the Waterside model. So here are some strategies. We can build on these success stories. We can focus on some easier verifiable arguments like those success stories. Actually, they are not very easy to verify, but in fact, they are possible to be done using experiments or using hard evidence. we should try to turn qualitative questions into quantitative questions. And we can also use modern technologies. Talking about modern technologies, for example, big data, data science, and machine learning or deep learning, some of the technologies that have been very trendy these days, like computer vision and natural language processing. We have seen very good like the GPT-3 or stable diffusion that you can see in Twitter, that many posts about them, very fascinating directions. About data science is to collect a large amount of data, and the hard work is to cleanse those data so that it's easier for further analysis. And those data can be fed into machine learning or deep learning algorithms in computer. And they can be used to automatically identify, classify, or cluster those data. Like in this diagram, some study use k-means cluster to identify some clusters of ape data. Also, in terms of deep learning, we can use some computer vision technology to automatically identify some shapes or fossils or stone tools, like this diagram. Some people use 3D analysis of those stone blades. So currently in paleoanthropology, there's already some uses, like use machine learning or data science to study stone tools, bone modifications, some footprints, fossil sites to discover new fossil sites, and of course also genetics. There's a good review by Calder et al. 2022, just last year. And it's also possible to apply to soft tissues or physiology. And I think we should do more to explore these directions. But the problem with data science or machine learning or deep learning is they do need much data. They are data hungry. And we have to gather a lot of individual of animals and with many species and with diverse habitats. Especially if we want to study those semi-aquatic or aquatic mammals, we have to gather data for them, which is not easy because they live underwater. That will need some underwater technology, like underwater cameras or hydrophones. And I think it's not easy to gather this data relative to some terrestrial or human data. So how can we use this technology, computer technology, to verify the claims, not only in Waterside model, but in any human evolutionary models? One thing we can do is comparative biology. So instead of studying fossil records that is vertical in the timeline, it should be possible to study horizontal, that is all the extant species of animals. We should be able to prove the existence or the extent of convergent evolution. We can test if humans is actually grouping or in the same trend with other terrestrial or aquatic animals. So we can use regression or clustering in machine learning using and then with a collection of large data sets with many species to study questions like is human actually streamlined at aquatic ape supporters? They suggest that if we want to verify this argument, we should do that numerically and not just ask the question as a speculation. Another question is, are human hair follicles actually follow the water flow? This is actually can be verified using experiments. For example, using computational fluid dynamics, CFD, we can study the flow of human when we are swimming or diving. So we know the vectors of those water flow, and we can compare them with the actual directions of human body hair follicles. So we can see how good match between these two sets of vectors. So in this way, we can turn a qualitative question into a quantitative one. And in my own field of study, there are many models can be used, like agent-based model or cellular automata. And it can be used as a computer simulation for some scenarios, like how people, how ancient human migrated throughout the world if they were like following a coastal path or inland path. And we can even use some grid-like model to simulate a large number of agents. So I just saw this recent example. It just came out just this month. The researchers use some technologies like X-ray, 3D animation, particle simulation to study those fossil footprints in human the foot footprints. And they argue that their data, the results suggest that those footprints, even though they show like a foot arch, like a structure, they are not necessarily caused by a static foot arches. Instead, they could be caused by a dynamic motion of those walking human ancestors. And actually, it's kind of disproving one major argument for the endurance running model. It says that foot arches evolved early in the human evolution. So I think whether an argument is verified, is proven or disproven or not, it's a very good example to use computer technology to on the studies on human evolution. And also there's a problem in aquatic ape or Waterside model researchers is sometimes it's hard to publish paper because some in some fast-paced research fields like machine learning, people it's a useful case to publish preprints in an archive server, and then they also submit it to journals or conferences. But some of the works are very influential works. They're actually archive only. they didn't even submit it to journals or conferences. And there is also another similar thing called bioarchive, that people submit evolutionary biology papers, preprints in this website. So if the work is machine learning related, it can also be submitted on archive, like this Crowder et al. I mentioned earlier. So the conclusion is we can see the ideas from Alex Tahadi or Elaine Morgan 50 years ago, the original ideas are actually evolving, although it is evolving slowly. And we can see that many of the ideas remain to be verified or falsified. So we should go for a new framework. I argue that we should have a broader picture of the model to make the model more inclusive, not just Waterside ideas, but incorporating running, cooking, or other ideas. And they may be actually different aspects of the whole story. And we should also build on some successful, well-received works. We should be able to use modern technologies. We should expand those hard evidence like aquatic diets or surface year. And we should also introduce soft tissue evidence to develop the methodologies so that mainstream researchers can accept them as evidence. Yeah, thank you for listening to the talk.
Wow, thank you very much. That's brilliant. Well done, Bert. That was an amazing tour of so many different things.
Yeah, so many things I want to talk about.
Well, I mean, you did such a great job to get all that in. I'm very concerned. I want to get other people in. I'm really interested to get Jack Armitage's comments because I don't think he's been here before, and he was sat there so attentively. I thought, I've never seen anyone so focused, but I think it's a photo. So, Jack, if you want to go first, you're very welcome to. You don't have to, of course. I don't mean to put you on the spot. But would anyone else like to go first? I mean, I've got lots of things I want to say, but I just want to make sure other people can say something first. Anyone like to go first? Jack, go on.
Yeah, sure. I'll take up your charge there. Thanks, Bert. It was just so interesting, and even more interesting for me because I know your work in A Life. So it's just very fascinating to see someone bravely kind of jumping into something like this as well. And I'm afraid I missed the first minutes of the talk, and maybe you already covered this, but I'm just curious to know, like, did this start as a very separate interest for you, or is there some connection to your the work that people know you for, or is this kind of a long-term? Do you in the future hope to be able to apply your A-Life research to help this type of science, or do you just not know yet?
Yeah, it actually came before my work on A-Life, artificial life. So, but you can say is somehow connected to the recent research topic, because it's all about evolution and it's all about life, but it's just applied to more primitive, the origin of life or the origin of the human species. So, but because it seems like in the field of evolution, it needs much more focusing work or study because I'm not studying evolution or biology in my university studies. So yeah, hopefully I will attack it in another way, and also hopefully I can work with people who are professional in this field to use some new technology, new methodologies to attack this problem. Yeah.
That's
you.
great. Thank you very much.
Would anyone else like to go next? Because I've got a whole load of things I want to ask, but is anyone anxious to go? I just want to say, well, it was great. It was great. I love the summary of all those features to get all of that stuff into just those 3 or 4 infographics is so impressive. And the new ones, which I'd never seen before, I really want to have copies of those. Really impressive with the whole thing. I love the balance. I love the way that you're inclusive of the endurance running model and savannah, some of the aspects of the savannah theory, which I agree shouldn't be dismissed out of hand. There are some good things there, and I love this idea of a multi-specialist. But the question I wanted to ask, my son and his friends have kind of got into this thing called Chat GPT, and they were asking about the aquatic ape on this forum, and it came up with a really neutral, rational answer. And I think, you know, one of the things you talked about was the sort of, I don't know if it's fair to say irrationality, but this kind of bias that's in the field, this kind of self-fulfilling prophecy that they can't look at these ideas. Maybe this AI kind of technology might open some doors there that haven't been opened before. What do you think about that?
These models like GPT or ChatGPT, the latest model, I also play with that. It's very interesting. It's actually trained on a very large corpus of internet text. So you can imagine that Wikipedia is also in its training data. And because the aquatic ape hypothesis is a known thing in the internet, and there are other websites that talk about it. So I think the model is able to weave a very well-prosed paragraph about the whole thing. I think it's a very impressive technology. But it can only do about what is existing, like what is talked about in the internet or in a paper, research papers. If you talk about, can you suggest some way to improve the aquatic ape or waterside hypothesis? Maybe it's possible. It can say something reasonable, but I'm not sure. I should try that to ask this model. But sometimes it will say something unreasonable, like make up facts that you cannot verify. So yeah, you should ask him some of these questions and see what's happening.
Right, thank you. Malgorzata, you got your hand up. Do you want to go next?
Yes, thank you. And I was a little bit late as well. Apologies for that. But I want to ask one question. You mentioned the counter argument about from the arch of the foot, kind of against the endurance running. I'm not familiar with what is their argument. If you could just brief me a bit. Sorry for if.
Okay. So one argument in the endurance running hypothesis is that the foot arch of modern human is one adaptation for running, for long distance running, and I think it's a very reasonable argument. And actually, I think it's true. Actually, a very strong argument. But the study just shown that it's not very early as as
Mhm.
as the model suggested.
It's not such an early adaptation as endurance running would suggest. Is that
Yeah,
the thing? Mhm.
I mean, it showed that even is the case, it should come, it should have come much later, rather than rather than a definitive feature of
Mhm.
how Homo sapien
Mhm.
come up, evolved.
Yeah.
Like maybe
Okay.
later time, but it's
Mhm.
still a very important feature of a human.
Yeah. Thank you very much. I also think that, you know, we definitely we are, you know, we definitely tend to run, but this could not be a driving force. You need
Maybe not Homo erectus or some other earlier species, but maybe Homo sapiens already have this foot arch feature, but we are not sure for now.
Thanks. Thank you.
Who would like to get, does anyone like to go and ask a question or make a point? Well, I want to just say I really like the triathlon ape idea, this idea of multi-specialist. I love that slide where you've got swimming, running, and technology. They're the three kind of main pillars of human evolution. You know, the stone tool use, the fire, the cooking, and of course, all of us have been told for years about the savannah, you know, the endurance running thing, but it's such a nice idea to slot in the swimming in there as well, and the aquatic side. So I thought that was really a great sort of idea going forward. The other point I wanted to make was, you know, you mentioned in one of your final slides about Waterside hypotheses, weaknesses of them, and that they perhaps haven't done hypothesis testing in a proper sort of scientific way, and I agree with that. I mean, when I did my master's degree and my PhD, that's exactly the line I took. And I sort of evaluated all the strengths of the idea and the weaknesses. And then for my research, I tried to fill in some gaps in some of those areas. And, you know, to study the Australopithecine pelvis in the context of wading, for instance, to put some hard fossil evidence on these ideas is exactly what I think we need to do more of. So really great. It was really insightful, some of the things you said there. So thank you very much. Does anyone else want to say anything?
Yeah.
Humphrey, go on.
Yeah, it's interesting about the long distance running, and I'm just thinking about it, that if you think now about going, if we were starting running on the savannah initially just on 2 feet would be a problem, because it's well, maybe it's not well known, but it is known that when we get older, we tend to bend forward when we're walking like an old man, and then an old person, and by doing that we changing our balance and are more likely to fall. And so there are people doing Feldenkrais and all this sort of stuff. They're saying, well, you have to do exercises to walk straight and to make sure that your balance is all right when you get older. So when you think about the long distance running, you couldn't run on 2 feet if you were not totally erect as we are. If you just take a gorilla and take his hands off the ground, he couldn't run on 2 feet. So I think Bert was alluding that it was sort of later in the evolution that maybe the long distance running came along, and I think that's probably right.
Yeah, that's true. That the straight body of human is suitable for both diving and long distance running, right? So it's kind of a multi-purpose feature of human. But the problem is which came first. We often argue this kind of aquatic environment to come first is more important. Some other argue that is bullshit. It should be just running. But maybe we can avoid this kind of arguments and just say that, oh, it's multi-purpose. Is some kind of pre-adaptation for each other, and study that with both scenarios in mind. Yeah. But there's a problem that which scenario can will produce this kind of multi-purpose feature. I don't have the answer now, but I think it's very interesting
I
to
think
study that.
I wouldn't avoid this discussion at all, because we are right. You cannot be an endurance runner before you have. I mean, that the proper posture comes first before proper endurance running at all. I mean, you cannot be half erect, almost quadrupedal, and do endurance running onto legs. That's just well. Once you have a proper human posture and modern human posture, you can do endurance running.
Yeah, you can say it's a possible sequence of pre-adaptation.
Yes, yeah, exactly.
Andrea or Leslie, do you want to ask anything? Is there any other questions? Go on then, Andrea.
Have to excuse any background noise you might hear. My family are doing things up there. Yeah, I was wondering whether Track would like to have a look at this, which is it's called Beyond the Sea Squirt: A Journey with Reflexes by Moira Dempsey, and it's a really interesting look, in a way, I guess, about the soft parts of how humans develop, and how there's sort of a sequence of reflexes that develop from a baby, and as humans learn to move, and it's a very interesting book because it talks about how if people don't integrate these reflexes correctly by not moving in correct movement patterns, or just not having enough physical activity, then it sets off a whole cascade of problems later on in life about how learning to read or learning to speak properly, and it's something that's really interesting, and I love the idea of Chuck's work that he's done, where everything is summarized so beautifully in these posters. And from my point of view, I very much like to look at the soft side, the sort of internal physiology and how things work for humans when they're learning to swim. So it's there's a lot of crossover and lots of fascinating new doors that I think we could go down to explore these things. So yeah, that's what I wanted to say. I thought it was a great talk. Thank you.
Thank you. Can you mentioned a book, right? Can you write the name of the book?
Jack's put it in the chat, so it's already done that. So that's
okay.
Brilliant.
Yeah, so that's very well anticipated, Jack. Thank you. Okay, anyone else got anything? I'm just a bit concerned about the time, but I wanted to ask about, Leslie, you go next. Go on then.
Oh, I just wanted to say that was just fantastic. Thanks so much, Bert, for that brilliant talk. And I loved the infographics. I thought they were incredible, really amazing works of art. And the way you mapped everything out so perfectly chronologically, they were really comprehensive and fantastic. One thing about getting the science out there and doing this properly is the question around being able to publish papers that mention aquatic, because obviously that's been a problem for anyone investigating any part of these subjects. So is something you've considered, how you might get around getting these kind of papers published?
So I suggest publishing a preprint on bioarchive or archive.org, but I'm not sure I think it will not solve the problem. Like it's like a temporary solution, because in order to be accepted, you have to submit to journals or conferences anyway. But if we can publish them on bioRxiv or archive, it's all like halfway done. You can share the work with others, and actually, it's not like any people can submit any work. You still have a certain kind of quality there, so that you can post in archive or bioRxiv. And the good thing is, if the work is some kind of crossover between paleoanthropology and machine learning, you can submit it on archive, and it's like the misuse of machine learning in anthropology. I think it's a good paper. That's yeah, I think it's good to be publishing there. Yeah. So I want to hear the opinion of others. Like, is it useful, or we still need to like submit to some journals?
Yeah, I mean, I think that peer-reviewed journals and the specialist journals are always going to be the litmus test for a student. And one of the talks we had earlier on, the second talk was actually Simon Bearder, and he's worked for 30 years in primatology and physical anthropology, trying to get these ideas in the textbooks, and they won't touch it. They ignore him. And of course, the reason they ignore him is because it's not in the peer-reviewed literature. It's not in Journal of Human Evolution, Nature, journals like that. And I mean, we can get these things published. There are various journals that have lower thresholds to get published, but by definition, then it's not as respected. So it's kind of like a catch-22 situation. But I think things like your work, which is sort of not in the middle of physical anthropology, but it's mainstream in a different area, but it borders on these ideas. This, to me, is the best hope we have. So various, I think Vernon Reynolds made the point that we should really be trying to get papers published on comparative anatomy in primatology and areas like that, not specifically in human evolution, because it is a bit of a sensitive subject.
And one thing I think we can do is avoid, maybe it's not, I mean, maybe more citing the what I call success story, like a shore-based diet or coastal migration, more building on those frameworks. It should be more possible to be received by peer review research. I think exactly. So. Instead of only citing Morgan or Hardy, of course we can mention that. But if the names are just only Hardy and Morgan, then you can predict the fate of peer review.
Yeah, that's the uncomfortable fact. Okay, well, has anyone else got any last points? Because I think we're getting towards an hour and 20 minutes now, so I think we should start to wind it up. But I'm assuming that's no. Okay, so thank you very much, Bert. That was a great talk, a really, really wonderful talk, and so many brilliant points. And thank you very much. I will get the video put online hopefully tomorrow, and well, certainly in the next couple of days. So thank you very much, and I'll update the website and send an email out when that's all done. So thank you, everybody. Thank you.
Thank you for having me.
Thanks, Bert.